Hi and welcome to Tutorial 6, Referencing. This tutorial builds on tutorials 4 and 5. After completing the tutorial, you should know the difference between in-text references, reference lists and bibliographies, when references are required, and how to present references. By now you should have a good understanding of why you need to provide evidence in your writing. The evidence that you refer to will be presented in your references. Now it's quite common to get confused by the difference between references, reference lists and bibliographies. So a reference is a piece of information that often sits within brackets that tells the reader where the supporting evidence has come from. These references are called in-text references, or they're sometimes called text citations, in-text citations. Apart from indicating to the reader that the idea you're using somebody else's, references allow the reader to follow up the information in more detail. A reference list is attached to the end of your assignment and it provides all the information for each of the sources that you've referred to within the text of your assignment. A bibliography contains the details of all the material that you read in preparation for your assignment, including those that you didn't use references from. The module handbook will indicate whether a bibliography is needed, but usually if you've provided a reference list, there's no need to include a bibliography as well. So when do you need to provide a reference? Well, as we covered in the previous tutorials, you need to provide a reference whenever you make a statement that's not considered common knowledge, and whenever you draw upon an idea that's not your own. Remember that you also need to provide a reference whenever you mention a theory, and whenever you define a concept, as shown in the examples. So how do you present references? Well, there are different systems for referencing, all of which lay out different rules for how the in-text references and reference lists should be set out. In social work, you'll follow the school's citation guide. This is based on a system of referencing called Harvard. And there are different versions of Harvard referencing, so it's important that you follow the school guide only and not other Harvard guides that could confuse you. There's a tendency for students to get quite anxious about referencing, and that is because it's a completely new skill, so that's understandable. But if you follow the school citation guide carefully, you should get your references right. You still might make some minor mistakes at first, and that is to be expected, because referencing does take a bit of time to get used to. Marks are only usually deducted in assignments when major errors are made. So, for example, where a student has failed to provide evidence for points made, or maybe they've been inconsistent with the presentation of references or used sources that are not credible. You're not expected to memorise the referencing rules. All you need to do is set the citation guide in front of you when you're ready to write your references and simply follow it. Since there's no requirement to learn the rules, this tutorial is not going to go through them all, but it will highlight some of the key points. Before we go on to look at how to present references, here's a quick recap about using websites. As we covered in tutorial 5, make sure that websites you source are credible. Remember to avoid sites aimed at the general public, such as Wikipedia, and stick to sites containing publications aimed at academic or professional audiences. Let's take a look now at how to present references within the text of your assignments. In the citation guide, there's a section that explains exactly how to present your in-text references, and a section that explains how to present your reference list references. For in-text references, the key points are that the reference should only contain the surname of the author or organisation name and the year of publication. So, for example, Anderson 2010. This means that by looking at the in-text reference, the reader won't know whether the source has come from a book, a website, or a journal article, they'll need to go to the back of your assignment to the reference list to find that out. Both authors are mentioned if there are two, so for example Anderson and McTaggart 2010, and where there are more than two authors, you should only provide the first author's surname, and then you use a phrase called et al., which is a shorthand way of saying and others. So Anderson et al. 2010, for example. At times in your writing, you might decide that you want to directly quote an author. If you use a direct quotation, you must provide the page number as well as the author name and year of publication, as shown in the example. But in the next tutorial, we'll discuss why you should avoid directly quoting authors too frequently in your work. You might have noticed that references can appear at different parts of sentences. Sometimes the sentence starts with a reference, and sometimes it appears at the end of the sentence in brackets. It's useful to be aware of these different options for integrating references into the text, as it will make your writing style a bit more interesting. There are no rules, you can basically just use whatever style you like. The slide provides some examples of different ways of introducing references into the text that might be useful for you, so pause the video while you read through them. Now that we've looked at how to present in-text references, we can consider how to present references in the reference list. As we covered earlier, the reference list is attached to the end of your assignment and contains in alphabetical order the full reference details of the sources that you refer to within your assignment. There are different rules for presenting different kinds of publications, and the citation guide has sections for each kind of publication, and it talks you through how to present those different kinds of references. The slide shows some examples of full reference details for a book, a journal article, and a website. Now these will probably look a bit alien to you just now, but the citation guide does explain it all to you, so you should follow it very carefully when writing your references. Just to explain this to you then, if it does look a bit unfamiliar just now, in the reference to the book, for example, the ED stands for the edition of the book. Palgrave Macmillan is the name of the publisher, and Hampshire is the place that the book was published. All of this information can be found in the copyright page of books, which is usually positioned on the back of the title page. For the journal article, we've got the author name and initials, the year of publication, the title of the article, and then the title of the journal. Then we've got the volume and part number of the journal that the article appears in, followed by the page numbers. And all of that information can be found on the front page of the article. So this will probably all be a bit new to you at this stage, and it probably won't start to make sense until you've had some experience of writing a reference list and using the citation guide. So don't worry too much at this stage if it's not making sense. So here we've got a website reference, and it's a reference for a publication on the Scottish Government website. So we've got the author, the year of publication, the title of the publication, and then the publishers. For government papers, the publishers will always be HMSO, which stands for Her Majesty's Stationery Office. Then we've got the place of publication. You can then indicate that it's an online publication and copy and paste the URL or the web address. Finally, you indicate the date that you access the publication, and you need to do that because web postings are obviously often updated. So information available on one date might no longer be available on a later date. So to sum up, the key points of this tutorial are: follow the school citation guide very carefully when presenting your references. In-text references contain the author's surname or organisation name and year of publication only. Whether the source is a book, a journal article or a website won't be clear unless the reader looks at the reference list. Finally, reference list references contain the full details of the sources cited within the text.